Hi everyone, today I'm going to cover why Silicon Valley doesn't understand Bitcoin. This is coming to you from an insider. I've been out in Silicon Valley for 8 years. I'm going to tell you exactly how it all works, how the companies work, how the VCs work, and what their mindset is. I'm going to give you my 8 years of intimate insider knowledge as to how they think. And I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the article here. So this newsletter, this article, comes out every Thursday. So if you go, I'm going to pop up a link here. Go there and you can either find the link in the description and or on the screen here. And it's Dan Held Substack. So this is my email newsletter, comes out on Thursdays. If you want to hear this first, go ahead and go check that out. All right, so in Silicon Valley, there's two major folks. You've got the tech companies and you've got the venture capital firms, or the investors, if you will. And I've already kind of covered my background in the space. All right, so diving into, and I wanted to add some funny images here. So I don't know who here has seen the Silicon Valley TV show. She's a VC. They kind of paint her in a very funny light. And then you've also got, Ross Hanneman. He's a VC as well. He's more of an angel investor type. He's actually modeled directly after a combination of Jason Calacanis, Mark Cuban, and a few others. And then you've got the builders, you've got the companies, you've got the geeks who go and build all the tech. All right, so going back to tech companies, what's the mindset of folks who work in tech and go build tech products? It's always about building, it's always about shipping and iterating. Never is it perfect on the first try. If you look at Facebook now versus what Facebook was when it first started, it's super different. And there's a good reason why. Products change and people's wants and desires change, and also the competitive landscape changes. So this is the right mindset. They need to go iterate and ship as quickly as possible. At Uber, we would try to ship a new version of the app every single week. So this is and when you understand how many people worked on it, we're talking like thousands of people working on this. It's pretty wild that tech companies can even ship that quickly. But Uber was always A/B testing and fiddling with different parameters. What if we changed the pricing here? What if we made the button blue? What if we shipped a new feature for US citizens? And the teams that I worked on did some of that. So I was formerly on Rider Growth, a growth product team. So we would go build new features and test them out. I was also on growth marketing. We go acquire the customers. So in tech companies, you always have to be innovating. You always have to be changing. But with money, you don't want that. Bitcoin is the core fundamental layer of the financial system. This is like the concrete foundation for the skyscraper being the world's financial system. You can't be ripping out the concrete and putting in new concrete all the time. It's not a good mindset to have for money. This money has a very, very high network effect. Once a certain money comes into existence, once a certain cryptocurrency, Bitcoin coming into existence, once it gets liquidity, number of people buy it and believe in it, and the tools and services built on top of it, it's very hard to disrupt that network effect. So I think Silicon Valley very much underplayed the network effect when it comes to money, and they just treated Bitcoin like another weather app. It's a weather app that just should be upgraded all the time. But what they really don't understand is that this should be unchanging. We need this to be stable to build on top of it. And finally, Bitcoin is perfectly crafted. Yes, it had some tweaks and fixes in the beginning, but the architecture itself and the monetary policy never changed. Bitcoin, and that's pretty hard for Silicon Valley folks to grasp, because that first version of the product was never perfect. It's always an iterative cycle. So for them, it was just unfathomable that Satoshi could get that right the first time. All right, now we're on to venture capital. So with the venture capital folks, these are your VCs. Some of the big names out there are like, for example, A16Z and Sequoia. Now, I know people who work at these companies. They're very sharp people, and by no means am I trying to say that these companies or other companies do poorly. What I'm saying is in general. So what's crazy about VCs is in general, they're not contrarian, which is pretty wild, because at first I'm like, okay, wait, their whole job is to go invest in new crazy ideas, right? No. They've got investors as well, investors who've given them money to then invest in these startups. Those investors have certain expectations. So what happens is A16Z and Sequoia, these very hot, very, very big VCs, these are the legendary VCs, they set the tone. They set the tone for everything. A lower level VC can't invest in a new innovative thing unless it's been christened by these major VCs as the next big idea. They are the thought leaders and they set the tone and the pace for investment in the space. If you diverge from that and you invest in whatever you feel like, you're going to feel like Michael Burry. Who here has seen The Big Short? I think it's a phenomenal movie. I would definitely recommend it. The book is phenomenal too. It was about a group of select hedge funds who bet against everyone else during the 2008 financial crisis and called it. They're the ones who saw it before anyone. Michael Burry's investors actually revolted. They tried to get him kicked out of his own fund. They sued him and they went nuts over it. He made them $700 million. But that's what it feels like when you go against the grain. Your investors are going to be like, what are you doing? No one else is making this trade. And that's where with VCs, they feel the same heat. If blockchain is hot, if chatbots are hot, scooters, drones, ride sharing, whatever it is, they've got to hop onto that next trend that everyone is hopping onto, not a divergent trend. And this is no matter how bad or good the concept is, which is pretty frustrating, because I've seen a few, for example, like chatbots. So chatbots, it was an idea that every interface, so the app on the right here is Robinhood, and that's called a graphical interface. So there's a chart and it's not just pure text or data, there's visualizations and there's buttons. Well, the idea was with chatbots that we'd revert back to a command line infrastructure where you type in you basically have a conversation with a chatbot. That requires a lot of keystrokes. Think about it. You type in a question that might be like 40 taps, when that one button in a graphical interface could represent all of that. So this was clearly a poor idea, but it didn't matter because it was hot. So every single deck that, and I've seen this with blockchain too, it was so nuts. Every single deck that was created for a startup had the word chatbot or AI or blockchain or ride sharing, or, for example, with ride sharing, it'd be the sharing economy. The startups have to mimic the big narratives that the VCs are dictating, because you need to have narrative market fit for your pitch with the VCs. And so, this has come and gone, and I've seen it with a bunch of different things. Same with VR. Okay, so VR is a prime example. I'm a big gamer, by the way. I've got an Xbox, I play COD all the time. But with VR, okay, let's think through the problem here. So you've got like a really cool video game where you can strap on the VR goggles and it's sort of immersive, right? It's only immersive if you sit down. You can't walk around. I mean, you're going to fall over your ottoman, you're going to fall over your couch. Okay, great. So now you have a more immersive sitting experience. And this is even if you account for the priciness of it, the lack of games, and by the way, most of the resolution for these goggles are terrible. I've got some of the new Oculus goggles and they're awful compared to my 4K TV. So there was a lot of reasons to believe that VR wouldn't be a thing, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter because the big VCs and the big tech companies all hopped onto the trend and it became hot. Bitcoin isn't immune to those cycles. So in the 2012 to 2015 era, that was the Bitcoin for payments era. Bitcoin was supposed to go disrupt Visa, PayPal. This was the big investment thesis that VCs had pitched. And then in conjunction, startups pitched that as well. VCs couldn't go to their LPs, their investors, and go, hey, by the way, we're going to go disrupt the US government and financial system. I mean, that's just nuts. They would go, this is crazy. Why am I giving you money to go do this? And so what happened is that, VCs wanted everyone to work around the Schelling point of payments. And it was pretty painfully obvious because I was building products there at the time. I was leading product at blockchain.com. We didn't really see traction, with this payments narrative. No one did. And there was little reason for them to. Bitcoin isn't an alternative to PayPal or Visa. It's a digital gold, but it's slower, harder to use, and more expensive than any traditional payment method. There wasn't any really good reason why people would use it. But that's what the VCs wanted to hear. That's what got you funded, and that's what the narrative was. So Bitcoin sort of died in Silicon Valley's eyes. I went to go work at Uber because there was nothing to do in the crypto space. I worked at Uber from 16 to 17, and in 17, we really start to see things pick up with Ethereum and ICOs. I put the year 2015 here because Ethereum was created in 2015, but the real intensity started in 2017. So VCs have been disappointed. They felt that Bitcoin had failed. They really didn't understand what digital gold meant. And so Ethereum was this perfectly crafted narrative. Apps and app stores were all the rage at the time. I worked at Uber. Uber was the hottest tech company you could work at in Silicon Valley in 2016. It felt like we were about to take over the world. You had Airbnb. You had every single company was an app, right? Well, Ethereum marketed itself as a decentralized app store, which would allow for dApps to be spun up for developers without restriction. This is like the holy grail that Vitalik is pitching Silicon Valley. And by the way, Vitalik was a writer. He wrote for, or I think he founded Bitcoin Magazine, and he wrote for Bitcoin Magazine. He understands narratives intimately. And he essentially pitched the perfect thing for Silicon Valley. And then ICOs and fundraising were a cherry on top. ICOs disrupted the VC model, and what more meta way to invest in something than disrupting yourself? Also, it allowed VCs to become immediately liquid, which for them was an incredible breakthrough because normally they have to wait 5 to 10 years to become liquid on their investment. They invest in a startup and they have to wait a long time until it either gets sold or IPOs. So in order for VCs and startups to embrace this new narrative, they had to reject Bitcoin as outdated and old. Oh, Bitcoin's old and Ethereum's newer. Ethereum is Bitcoin 2.0. And Ethereum represented this bold new world of world decoupled from centralized companies like Google, Apple, and Facebook, and Amazon. But to anyone with a basic knowledge of how blockchains worked, it was easy to understand how few potential use cases there were for these dApps. I mean, at Uber, we would run experiments and see if we added a half a second of latency, how much that would degrade the number of people opening up the app and getting a ride. It's huge. There's publicly available data on how Amazon and Google have experimented with this as well. There was no possible way that any of these dApp ideas were going to work on chain. CryptoKitties was another prime example where CryptoKitties clogged the network. It was very apparent that they were not scalable. You could only store valuable data. Think about it. You've got a copy of this ledger on every single, or a copy of this data on many different computers, that being a ledger or other data. And that is like pretty nuts. You don't want to store your tweet on 10,000 computers because you need it to be immutable. And then finally, from a monetary perspective, why the hell would we go back to a barter system? That's what ICOs and dApps are, is we'd have a unique coin for everything. So you're literally going out and being like, I'll trade you Apple coin, like an Apple coin, for a ride coin. So cool, we've we've gone back to a barter system. Great, that isn't innovative. Okay, and another mindset that VCs have is diversification. So with VCs, they see a huge failure rate with startups, right? You've got like, for every 10 startups or every 100 startups you invest in, only like one has a really knock it out of the park sort of performance. And what's kind of crazy that I found out later too in Silicon Valley is that most VCs don't beat the market, which means that most VCs, despite their due diligence and whatnot, they didn't really outperform anyone else, any other random investor who was randomly picking startups. So in the Harvard Business Review, they had this really fascinating article where they looked at a certain foundation's experience in investing over 100 hedge funds, and I believe this is over 20 years. This is a really good perspective over performance of VCs, and they saw terrible performance. For example, 62 out of 100 failed to even beat the returns from a small cap public index, which meant you were better just putting your money in the stock market in an index fund. And then some of these, there's very few that were able to compensate us for the fees and illiquidity. Remember, once you put your money in as an LP, you can't get your money out for a long time. Finally, VCs aren't experts on the topic. They talk to startups and consultants who are the on-the-ground experts in the trenches. VCs are experts at companies and allocating capital. Bitcoin's blockchain is the intersection of a ton of different disciplines. You've got game theory, computer science, economics, politics and law, etc. It requires a really nuanced understanding of money, and Silicon Valley fundamentally does not understand money. And so when they saw crypto, they're like, how about we diversify into all these different potential investments? Well, you don't need to diversify once you have a digital gold. The breakthrough that Satoshi enabled through his blockchain technology was an immutable monetary policy and an immutable way to transact. But the fundamental component of how that all works is scarcity. Once you have 21 million Bitcoin, you don't need another chain. You don't need to reinvent scarcity again. It's scarce because there's so few units. And once there's the Schelling point, or the network effect around that ledger of that scarcity. Like we all invest in Bitcoin's 21 million, not Dogecoins or another coins. There's no reason to go use another coin to store value because we all store value there. And then, one of the last parts here, prices are signals. So VCs and tech startups look for fundraising. We look at that and we go, okay, this is a signal that this market is hot. This company just raised 10 million, 100 million from legendary VC. This is a signal to the market to either go build more products there or for VCs to go allocate capital. But with crypto, valuations are so fundamentally divorced from any sort of reality of traction. So in startups, they typically have traction to show. They're like, look, we're making money or we're growing really, really fast. We need venture capital money so we can grow faster. With crypto, the valuations are completely divorced from any sort of real world application or valuation. For example, like IOTA being fundamentally broken or Ethereum Classic being 51% attacked all the time. And BitConnect, which is an outright Ponzi scheme and scam. And many of these other cryptocurrencies, almost all of them, other than Bitcoin, really fall flat on the value props that they offer. So, with this, I've spent 8 years out here in Silicon Valley. I've had an awesome time meeting a bunch of smart people. I think for me, it's just very frustrating to see the rest of everyone out here not get it. They latched on to ICOs and Ethereum and the payments narrative, but they never really got digital gold. I think now we're starting to see some get into it. I think it's a little unfair to say that they're all like that, but I would say 90% are like that. And this is a plea, and I hope that other content creators and other people in Silicon Valley can watch this, think about creating more content for Bitcoin understanding and Bitcoin understanding from a Silicon Valley mindset. So I hope everyone enjoyed the sort of in-depth understanding of how VCs and startups and companies in Silicon Valley work. If you enjoyed it, please give me a like, give me a subscribe, and make sure to subscribe to the newsletter so you can get it first on Thursdays. Cheers.